Section 2. You will hear the director of a club giving a talk about an ancient game played on ice called curling. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16 on page 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Montreal Curling Club. I hope you'll enjoy the introductory program we've prepared for you. I'll start with a brief introduction to the game itself and the equipment, so that you'll be able to enjoy it when you watch it later on. I'll then go on to say a little about the history of the sport and the club. So, first, let's take a look at the game of curling and the implements it uses. It's played on ice, and the object of the game is for two teams to push heavy stones across the ice towards a target. Now, there are 4 people in each of the 2 teams. The first is called the lead. The next is called the second. The next, surprise, surprise, is called the third. And the final player, who is absolutely key, functions as the captain, but is always called the skip. That's S-K-I-P. The area of play on the ice, whether it be on a rink or on a frozen lake or stream, is called the sheet. This long, thin area is 42.15 meters by only 4.25 meters. And unlike ice hockey ice, for example, it is constantly groomed by frequent shaving to keep it perfectly level. At either end of this are the 2 zones for the targets. Each one is known as a house. A little bit about the equipment we need. The stones are made from granite. Originally, these were held by your fingers in holes specially carved out in the top. But then it was decided to add a handle to get a better grip. The other distinctive implement is the brush, or broom. This is used for 2 purposes. To clean the ice, of course, but more crucially, to warm it. This melts the ice slightly and lessens the friction, so you get a smoother slide. Curling is not an expensive sport. You don't buy your own stones. In fact, it is illegal to play in a match with your own stones, but you can use your own brush. There are 2 main types, Scottish and Canadian. The former are normally made out of horsehair, and the latter, which are now more frequently used, are made of synthetic materials, and they don't leave as many threads on the ice. Now, apart from stones and brushes, the only other piece of equipment you would need as a beginner is a rubber sole on one of your shoes, depending on which shoe you lead from. The captain will often carry a stopwatch to gauge when the ice needs to be changed. All equipment and clothing can be bought in the club shop.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20 on page 4. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
A quick word about Montreal Curling Club. It's renowned, not only because it often wins championships, but because it was the first club for any sport in the whole of the North American continent. And although curling is not as well known as many other winter sports, we still boast a certain amount of influence in the National Sports Council. And what are the origins of the game? It's now well established that it started in Scotland in at least as early as the 16th century. Queen Victoria, on her frequent trips to Scotland, often played it, but wrote in her diary that it required exceptional strength to throw the stones. Her patronage attracted a great deal of interest in the game, especially amongst younger players, and this was enhanced further when she granted a royal title to the Caledonian Curling Club, which had been set up in the early 19th century to create standard rules for the game. Curling has always had support in high places. In the 16th century, the Scottish Parliament actually banned golf and football as violent and unprofitable sports. They felt that local men should spend any free time practicing archery for self-defense against their enemies. But the less popular game of curling wasn't included in the ban. The art of throwing stones was thought to be just as useful as shooting arrows. But back to Canada. Here the game has flourished since the beginning of the 19th century, when Scottish soldiers posted there enjoyed playing it on the frozen lakes and rivers. Because of the difficulty in importing granite stones from Scotland, cast iron was used instead, obtained from melted-down cannonballs, which had originally been brought over from Europe. Now Canada is regarded as the most successful curling nation in the world. Now, the game you're going to see.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3 on page 5.